last but not least, Flipper Hole, Bryan Fair, John Durham, come on up.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. All right. One of the things we're gonna, obviously, we're talking about flipping folding real estate, but today we have to end at 12, but we will hang around afterwards. If some of you did not get some of your questions answered and want to talk further, so just let you know that. But at 12, you can leave too if we've been boring and you don't want to go. We won't be offended. So I just didn't want you to be like you were trapped in your seat.
I might get my opinion. It's gonna be okay.
You want to introduce yourself real quick?
I'm John Durham.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm the OP in Stockbridge and Athens. Athens we call the Holy Land, right? Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
There we go. And I have a real estate team down in Stockbridge, and I've been in real estate since '01. And I started in the flipping business. I tell everybody the same story, man. If you say these stories over and over again, we were talking about my mother-in-law who has Alzheimer's, and they say, and we say the same thing over and over too. I feel like I've got it. I started flipping houses, investing in property in about '02, just because I wanted to learn. And I'm in real estate today because of that, because through the crash, my business flourished because I had developed a group of people that were buying and selling properties at a high level, and I was their agent. So, and it really kind of saved my career. It's kind of who I am.
Cool. And John runs an amazing business on flipping real estate. He built the sales business around that. And how I met him in 2008, 9, and 10, and at the highest level, when the market dropped in all foreclosures, he was the #1 agent, his team in Henry County. And it was like, what, 90% flips? Yeah. And so he comes from a lot. So you're ever looking at that, he's been awesome. He still has flipped through all these markets. So he's very prudent. My name is Bryan Fair. They reference me as like the founder because I just been around the longest, I think. I got my real estate license in 1988. Like, woohoo! Everybody's like, wow, he's really old. So I've learned a lot from mistakes, failures, and having some successes along the way. But I'm more on the hold side of investing in real estate. And we'll get into that a little bit. One of the things I always like to do though is here's my warning. Investing, wealth building is very boring. And all you have to think about it's a daily discipline. All right. But it is a boring thing. And I always talk about the same things over and over again because I don't really know what else to talk about. Because there's no easy button, there's no fast track. It's ultimately you have to be disciplined. What I like to always back up and talk about it is the basics of financial planning, just real quick. I'm gonna bore you in this, but I just feel like I have to always talk about this. And it's just on a financial planning pyramid, there's an order of what you do on how you build wealth. And the first part of this, which is the biggest part, I kind of use this reminder so I do it right. Writ's kind of like a written order, so that's how important this bottom piece is. And that stands for, so the first one on W is will. Wills, I know that's boring and not a fun topic, but absolutely so necessary. And I'll give you my disclosure. Many years ago, Marcy and I, we kept on kicking the can on this conversation because it's really not a lot of fun. Like we got to talk about one of us dying or something like this. Not an enjoyable conversation. We also got introduced to an attorney that was overcomplicating things. And it was just going on for months and months and months. And what we realized is first step is just go out and get a will, a very simple will, and then every year or two build on it. But please, I've been doing this long enough. I've seen horror stories of people passing without wills. You do not want the government deciding how your family and your assets are distributed, right? Pretty safe. They're not really good at that.
Yeah.
So don't let them. So just be sure you're doing that. The wills, then on the R is reserves. And a couple rules of thumb on that. I typically say 3 to 6 months in hard expenses on your business. I'm not talking about the cost of sales, but I'm saying your actual overhead, your expenses in your business, 3 to 6 months put in reserves that you don't touch unless you absolutely have to. And if you have to, you replenish it. Same thing in your personal life. I would do 6 to 12 months. Now you can do a year, 2 years, whatever you want. I'm just giving you minimum parameters, but 6 to 12 months of reserves of your hard expenses in your personal. And this is not money that you're putting away to invest in. This is money you don't ever touch. But we do have, life happens, and you want that money there so you don't have to disrupt your investments or your business to take care of something. So always be sure that as soon as you use it, be sure you replenish it. Another thing is
Bryan told me a long time ago, he's taught me a lot since I've known him, but one of the things he said when I first met him is let's talk regularly, don't make the same mistakes I've made as far as being an OP in office. I have invested this money before.
I have, I mean,
Just take our word for it, man.
Yeah.
It's,
No.
you won't sleep at night.
right.
You know, it's really not worth it.
Well, what happens is and I've done the same thing, but you never know what's around the corner. And so you invest in something that's not very liquid, and all of a sudden something happens, and you're going, uh-oh.
When you're sitting at a closing going, please, God, please. Yeah, it's not fun.
No, it's not true. And insurance, again, I know these are really exciting topics, but necessary. You need to be well insured. Just be sure you check on it always. Insurance, sometimes there's gaps with companies. You have an insurance policy that lapsed and they didn't tell you about it, and you don't know about it. So always be sure you're checking, you understand what your dates, we always have spreadsheets around when our dates, insurance, different policies that are coming up. So we're aware of it 90 days beforehand. So just be sure you're on that. Be sure you're well insured. Little gaps where you can be exposed. One common one is on car insurance. The liability side in the car insurance is what you should be most scared about. And typically what's built in there could be very little, it could be 300, 400,000. An attorney would say $1 million plus is what you have to do. So you might have to layer something on that. You can look at commercial umbrella policies. I also recommend personal umbrella policies. That's like if somebody's inside your house, falls on the sidewalk, splits their head, they sue you, that's where you get the coverage there. So just be sure, those aren't very expensive, but necessary. And what I've observed in my years of being around is attorneys typically like working with insurance companies because what will insurance companies do? Settle. Attorneys, unfortunately, want the quickest way to cash. An insurance company is a faster way. So I want them off my LLCs, off my assets, and on insurance. So be sure that you're doing this along the way, that you're well insured. Life insurance too is important. And then the last thing is taxes. This is the trap. Well, I remember many years when I was running a mega team, and we had a phenomenal year. And I invested some of my tax money in some things. And then I had a really bad year. And I had not properly done my estimating. And so I chased this for a couple of years trying to get that right as an agent. So just, you have to be sure, and this is probably some people who run into this because was 2021 an amazing year? Yeah. Part of 22 wasn't, and 23 wasn't great. Okay, so if you're in that position, you got to fix that, but be sure as a business owner that you're doing your estimated taxes. You never want to spend the IRS money. They're not very patient. You really don't want them in your bank accounts. So be sure you're covering these things. And this is kind of like the absolutes to be sure you're doing this, because when you're building this, your wealth building, you're building it this way. So you don't skip this and go up to the top, right? In the middle part, just simple as like stocks, mutual funds, index funds. You can put in here where you do 529s, which are college plans. You can do IRAs. Everything in here is very, you can liquidate. If IRAs, you can liquidate, but there's penalties, but you can liquidate, okay? And that's why this is still an easy world to work in, because it has liquidity to it. Now, the two things, to get up to this next level, and this is what we're talking about today, there's two keys. I'll put two keys here that you have to do to open up this next level. One, you've never heard this before. You have to be operating off a profit and loss statement. I'm not going to ask for hands, but you cannot run a business effectively if you're not running a monthly P&L. Because what you have is a hobby. So you have to have a P&L because you have to know where you are in your business. Are you losing money? Are you making money? What does it look like? And you're learning how, running a P&L is the first step to learn how to have other businesses or buy businesses. So you can never go up to this next level, because the next level is the real estate, businesses, and private equity. These aren't very liquid, and typically in a bad market, it's not the best time to liquidate them, right? So that's the thing is the P&L is one of them, and then what's the next one? What do you think the next one is?
Balance sheet.
Balance sheet.
Budget.
Budget's important. Net worth sheet. You have to, if we're talking about wealth building, we can't talk about it without having a net worth sheet. You have to have, and you might do a net worth sheet right now and go, wow, that sucks. I've been there. I mean, we talked about it because the first time you were doing it,
Negative.
it was negative.
Right.
Yeah, that's not fun.
Most of the people you talk to are negative, or they don't want to do it because it's negative, but just, it is what it is. And if you don't watch it, it's not going to change. But when, man, you know, you want to learn how to flip houses, we can teach you that. We can teach you how to buy at the courthouse steps, teach you how to hold rentals. The biggest life-changing thing in my financial history has been the net worth sheet.
Yeah.
It literally, you start making decisions better, you start looking at it all the time, and you start thinking, how does that net worth grow versus how does it shrink?
Yeah.
And it's,
Well, and that net worth sheet is a rather key point. I almost put it down here, but I don't be hypocritical because debt is another critical one. But it's okay, there's good and bad debt. But the reality with the net worth sheet, that kind of gives you, usually if your net worth is upside down or not very attractive, what's usually the culprit?
Debt.
And so it's having a plan around it. Now, I would say that the house on fire debt is credit cards. If you're carrying credit cards, Dave Ramsey has a great system, the snowball payment, use that, get those credit cards paid off and don't use them that way anymore. And other things you slowly can knock away as you build up this portfolio. So does this make sense? I just always want to talk about that because I want to be sure you understand, you've got to do this steps to get here. Don't skip and jump here. That's where you hear all the horror stories of somebody who couldn't keep the rental property, keep the real estate because they hadn't built this property. So,
yeah, if y'all were around enough, if y'all were doing this business in the crash, man, nobody had any money. You hear people say all the time, I don't have any cash, but I've got plenty of equity in my house. If I ever need it, I'll borrow it.
Right.
And they were doing things without all of this right here, kind of flip that upside down is the way people are doing things. And then overnight, the banks quit loaning money.
Yeah.
And the house values went down and then everybody foreclosed on rental properties, their personal homes and all of that.
Right.
Just simply from doing it the wrong way.
Yeah. And in the reality with real estate, and I always share the story, why I love investing in real estate, and holding it pretty much forever. I'm not a good example of selling. Right. You flip,
Yes.
I'm just not. Like, people ask me, well, what's your formula on selling a house? And I go, don't have one yet.
Yeah.
I have a hard time selling it.
Right.
Because it's such a great asset for long-term investing. I mean, what's cool about real estate?
We'd split the property. I'd find the deal, they'd give me the money, we'd flip it, and then I'd take my half and they'd take their half. And I would do 3 or 4 of those, and then I would buy a rental property with it. And I would do it again, because every time you buy a rental property, now, if you can get a regular mortgage, that's good. But a loan for a rental property is gonna be 25% down. So you're looking at, you buy and I have to learn to speak the language up here. Where I'm at, you buy a $200,000 house. I don't know if y'all can find those up here. But that's $50,000 that just came out of your bank account. Your net worth sheet looks great, right? Your cash flow probably looks great, but you got $50,000 less in your bank account. So I flip now, in the beginning, I flipped to survive. I flip now to replenish that so I can buy more rental properties. Because that money, it's a great investment. You're gonna get it in $1,500 checks.
Right.
But it's $50,000 gone.
Well, in the flipping, remember, that's a business. That's on your P&L statement when you're looking at that. And I think every agent should be doing some flipping. The key though in that is be sure that you either are an expert around contracting or you have somebody that's really good at it and very accessible to you. Because in this market, I don't know if you've ever noticed it, it's pretty hard to find good contractors. We agree? Yeah, it's tough. So just be sure, because the thing about flipping homes is, number one, most of us in this room can look at it, the deal, and know it's a good deal buying it. The key is, can you bring contractors? The timing is a critical part of flipping. The longer you're holding that property, the profits are dropping. So we're not up here to say do one or the other. You should be really doing both along the way. But if you don't have that access to contractors, I'd be very careful.
Part of our job in this world is meeting new contractors. Every time you go to Home Depot, write the names on the truck, write their phone numbers down, because contractors are coming or going, right? They come in, they do a great job, they do a few houses, and then they just kind of disappear for a little while. And so if you don't have backups, you could really get hurt. Plus that no one, personally, I had a contractor that became one of my best friends for a while. I thought anyway. And I would pay him to put the air conditioning in a house. He would put it in, so he gets paid. He would then steal it. So I'd give him money for a new air conditioner, which he would then take the one he just stole and put it right back in the house. Yeah.
I'd be your friend too.
Yeah. Pay attention to what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So also too, when we talk like this is open. Like you can ask any questions you want along the way. This is more conversational. We want to be sure if you have some specific questions you're trying to get answered today, that happens. And remember, we'll also stay after if there's more questions to be asked.
Yeah.
Some of the things that we hear a lot, they're saying is, well, what's your formula around buying a hold property or buying a flip property? On the hold side, I'm not like a massive spreadsheet guy, but I do understand cash flow matters. And I have had experiences of violating fundamentals and it hasn't worked out too good. So I would not recommend that. Know what your formula is. So mine was like, okay, I want to be like $300 to $400 positive cash flow on my property. Now, in this market, what that means is I'm gonna have to put more what in a property? Cash. I'm gonna have to put more money in to get that to the point with higher rates to be sure I'm cash flowing. I would rather buy one property than two or three leveraged with very little cash flow. Don't buy like that because the cash flow piece will outlast any market. I'll always give this example, and some of you have heard this before. A property we owned in the early nineties, I bought like $75,000. This property I still have, it's in Norcross. And it was renting for like $850 a month. And we were fine going along. And I watched this property go up in value, 2004 and 5, it was worth like 150, 160. I'm like, wow, I doubled it. That's awesome. And then 2009 and 10, it was back to 75,000. And still renting. The rent had got up to about 980, almost 1,000. And the rent was interesting to me was the price dropped in half. The rent did not. It kind of bounced back to like 775. I still cash flow the whole time. So here we go. The market starts picking back up. And here we are today. I still have this property. It's worth $260,000. And it cash flows dramatically. And the rent's like $1,800 a month now, which just shocks me because I just know the history of this property. The reason I give that example is, did I ever lose money? No. Was the property worth a lot less at times? Yes. So that's the thing is if you get into cash flow, you survive the corrections. They become irrelevant. Because rents, everybody's always gonna rent a house. That's what I love about investing in real estate. It's not like a tech stock that might go away. I was just reading an article about all the, in the last 5 to 6 years, and have all these companies come out that are trying to send satellites and rockets into space. A bunch of them are getting ready to blow up and run out of money right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so people, billions of dollars are getting ready to disappear in some of these companies. So real estate doesn't disappear.
Well, long-term holds fixes a lot of mistakes too.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the mistakes I made in the early goings are now rentals that are
Yeah.
either paid for or almost paid for. Where, it was just a bad choice, but over time it worked out.
Well, in flipping, you have a, why don't you kind of go through some of what the things
Yeah,
you
you
do?
really don't have that option.
No, right.
You're flipping, so, yeah, you gotta be a little sharper on it. Yeah, flip, so everybody asked me the formula on flipping, every house is different. I would say I have a formula, but it's not a, what's the percentage? I don't know what the percentage is. I'm looking at golly, let me try to get in y'all's world up here. $400,000 house that I'm gonna sell. Sometimes I have partners, sometimes I don't, so I charge a commission of 5% if I do it with a partner. So 5%, that's 20 grand, right? And now we're paying a little bit of closing costs again, right? Those days have come back. So 25,000, all right? So 400 minus 25,000, 375. Okay. Now, I used to figure, this is funny, I've got a spreadsheet that assumes a $15,000 rehab. That's carpet today, right? I mean, that's not rehabbing anything.
Yeah.
So now the average rehab on our house is probably 40. So what's 375 minus 40, 335? So I'm 335 is my break even for this house. Now I've got to have profit and a cushion, okay? That profit and a cushion, in my world, down in Stockbridge, on a $200,000 house, I may do that with a $30,000 to $40,000 profit figured in. So now I'm offering, $395, something like that. It would be bigger up here because the bigger the price, the bigger the mistake could be, right? So it'd be bigger. But in my world, that would be about a $40,000 profit. So that's what I'm offering on the house. Is that, 40 turns into 30 really quick. Okay, so you could say, well, that's your formula then. That's the percentage. But that percentage could change if it's a ranch on a slab, vinyl sided. Man, I could rehab that in 2 weeks. I can have it on the market. It's probably in a neighborhood where they all look the same. So if this one sold for 300, then this one's gonna sell for 300. I'm not gonna miss that. Versus I go out and get a 3-acre, farmhouse somewhere, which I love, by the way. They sell great. But I could miss that.
Really?
I could miss that CMA. Oh, God, yeah. Well, where I am, I don't know about up here. Right? Yeah, where I am. I could miss that CMA by 15,000 fairly easily, right? Because there's not an identical sale to it. So I could totally miss that. So you think you miss a CMA by 15, well, that 40 just went to 25 just because I didn't do my comps really good. Okay. So that's the reason for the cushion. And that's an older house. man, you get into it. And we're gonna say some things that are probably sounding scary. That's just because the scary ones are kind of funny. We live through them. We don't want, man, there's no need to be
Some
scared.
weren't too funny in that.
They weren't funny then. Yeah, they weren't funny then.
You're funny with time.
Nothing to be afraid of here. Y'all know real estate. You know what it's worth. Man, you just figure out what it's gonna cost to sell it, what's it gonna cost to rehab it, and then make the offer. Just make the offer. That's all there's to it. Now, in my world, I'm doing a little bit of both. So on that, let's say that same house that I just offered $395 for, I'm hoping I get it, but a lot of times they don't answer me. A lot of times they tell me I'm an idiot. That's okay. But a lot of times they come back and say, we can't do $395, but we'll do $340. And so then now it's a rental house. Now that just made, somebody said, how do you make a decision? Well, that just made my decision for me. Now I don't have rental house at 350. I'm speaking a different language than what I live in. But in the 200 to 250, they won't take 195. They'll take 240. I was okay. I'll take it. Still a great deal, but it's a rental house now. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you have to make offers. But also have, you need to know where your formula is gonna stay and be willing to walk away.
Right.
And sometimes on deals, I know I've had this situation happen where all of a sudden, 3 months later, they come back and go, hey, would you still be willing to do that deal? Yeah, happens a lot.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's just a matter of, and it's funny because I have a goal that I have to have 5 conversations a week asking someone that, hey, I'm a buyer. Oh, by the way, I'm a buyer, cash buyer for property. If you have somebody that wants to sell their house at a reduced price, we can close in 2 weeks or potentially let them rent back for a period of time. So there, see, I just nailed my 5 in one day. But here's the thing, it's like, you have to get serious, get everything in place, get your money together, and then you start telling people, hey, here's what I'm willing to do. And also, some of my parameters, I stay in the areas I know, like I don't ever buy and hold homes inside 285. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I just don't know the market. And that's just a different market to play in. I've lived in the suburbs, and also my other criteria is my property management company has to be able to manage it. Because I'm not gonna manage it. Yeah, so, or have access to some property management company that we could do, like we bought one in Peachtree City, and that was out of our reach, but we found a company there that could handle it. So, so think about what your parameters are once you start looking to buy real estate. How many people here own investment real estate? Cool, awesome, handful, good job.
Man, 2 things that he just said that I don't want y'all to miss. He tells every class we go to, he's a buyer. If you have something, call him. And rarely does anybody ever do that. So I'm not always buying holds. I mean, when I buy a couple of rentals, I've got to replenish that cash. So I'm not always buying holds. So I've started sending them to him. I mean, and he looks at them, and if he's gonna buy them, he buys them. So, man, you've got a buyer sitting right here.
Now, if it's just an active listing and market price.
Right. Yeah.
I don't want to offend your seller. But, I mean, if you have, what we find this day and age, probably you've seen this with flips, but I've seen it with holds too, is more of the properties need a lot of work. And I've actually seen, have you seen deal flow pick up? Like more, yeah, I have 2 in the last 3 to 6 months.
Yes.
Where we've seen investors either kind of cashing out or investors got trapped. Like they never got into permanent financing and now their rate has gone up and their negative cash flow. Or they bought the property hoping they were gonna rent it at this insane price and rents had just settled down. And now all of a sudden they have a lot of work to do, or they had a tenant turnover and now they get rent ready. They don't have the funds to fix it up. So those are pretty much in the last 2 to 3 months, we've had several properties we bought. They all were in that criteria. So be looking at that. Another good way of finding properties is number 1, talking to agents, but also go talk to property management companies. They're motivated when they have somebody who is selling a property, they're losing a client typically, because it's either selling to a buyer or another person who maybe manages somewhere else. So if you go to a property management company and you know some people who own them, the small companies, go to them and say, hey, if you come up with a deal, one of your people want to sell, call me, I'll buy it and I'll keep it with you. And they're like, oh, cool. So now they're motivated going, wow, I don't lose that because that's part of their income in the business. So just some different strategies we've done.
Yeah, use the property management companies. The part 2 of what I didn't want you to miss is if you're gonna hold property, find out what your counties are like. And in my world, I would, and I don't know that this is even a term, but we use it. Clayton County is more of a tenant-friendly county, where Henry County, where I live, is a landlord-friendly. And what I mean by that is I stood in the Clayton County courthouse and had a judge ask me next to a lady that hadn't paid me rent in 2 or 3 months, asked me if I could help her. And I said, well, I am helping her. Right? Versus Henry County says, you don't pay, you gotta go. You know, they're not gonna sit there and argue with me about what that, so it's landlord friendly and tenant friendly. If you're gonna hold, you wanna, and part of the reason stay out, I don't mind Fulton County either. So hang on one second, there was one hand in front of you. Let me get to her and then I'll come back there to you. So yeah, go ahead.
So I made the mistake. I did not do my research and did a couple of flips back to back a
Mhm.
few years ago. And when I didn't understand, I thought, oh, I'm making all this money. So it ended up being like 60,000 and then I ended up paying 30 in capital gains. So, well, what about capital gains?
Yeah. Well, you as an agent, it's worse than capital gains. It's income if you're flipping.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a real, I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah,
So
when you, just to clarify, when you flip a property quickly, you're paying normal tax rates on that income and profit you made on that.
So do you hold it? How long do you hold it before you sell it?
well, timing is everything. So the taxes stink. But man, every day that clicks on the calendar, something could happen. Or something weird could happen. So the quicker you get it sold. So my goal is 4 months.
So I was going back to, don't flip it, rent it for a year or two.
No, you don't ask me, because I say
No,
forever.
no, no, I'm going back to work for a reason, right? So to negate the actual taxes, right?
Yeah.
We hold it for 5 years,
Yeah.
live in it for 2 and move.
But
But live in it though, you gotta live in
You gotta
it.
live in it.
Otherwise you pay capital gains.
What they're talking about right there is a little strategy. Like, for instance, if you had some rental properties, I'm gonna take it an extra step. If you had several rental properties and you decided, I'm gonna have this. In fact, I know somebody did this recently. Sell 3 properties, your 3 rental properties. Now, the key is trying to line them up to sell at the same time. So you might want to find one buyer or somebody who can get a big investor. You sell those and you do what's called a 1031 exchange. And which means you have to buy, the next property you buy has to be like kind, so it has to be a rental property. And it has to be at that price or more, basically more price than you sold this for. So you could go buy a condo at the beach from the proceeds of this, tax-free, buy it, but you gotta rent it for a year or so. And afterwards, you could move into it. And if you never sell it, you won't pay taxes. Now, if you ever sell it, you'll pay taxes. But that's deferring taxes, and I've seen some people do that into some type of retirement properties or properties they're gonna kind of keep forever, so.
Yeah. So the answer to that question though is part of I've stood at the courthouse steps 100 times and the sheriff at the courthouse steps doesn't always love us because we get in the way. But I've heard them call us sharks and scumbags and everything in the world. Man, we're not walking out of there making 40 or 50,000 every time we sell a house.
Yeah.
There's cushion in that. There's profit. There's cushion. There's taxes. There's all sorts of things in there. So that's a great question. You just got to plan for that and make sure that when you make an offer that you've got enough in there to cover all of it, to make enough money that's worth your while to do it.
Well, and congratulations for taking the risk of doing it, and you made a good profit, but so that's good. You have that on your
The first one
belt.
was 6 weeks. I thought, oh, this is the easy.
Greatest thing in the world.
Every week, and then the next one was a 6 month.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good though. You learn a lot.
All right, we were back in the back at register here.
I was just gonna ask, how do you know which counties are landlord friendly?
I found out the hard way.
Okay.
So, yeah. You probably could ask a good property management company. They could probably be able to tell you. I found out by standing in these courthouses.
A good property management company will know because how they file dispossessories in the court system and how they react. And there are some counties in Metro Atlanta that are pretty rough, and that you could have a tenant, I have one, sitting in a property rent-free for 8 months.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to get them. Sometimes it's hard to get them out. Now, generally speaking, it's
Yeah.
not, but
No.
man, they've got some attorneys running around now that if y'all ever heard the sovereign citizen? I don't even know what that means, but it makes it really hard to get somebody out of a property.
Well, that's why we went back to being sure you have reserves when you go into this. There's always risk.
Right.
Something could happen. A tenant gets out, or you can't get a tenant out. So, yes.
Yeah.
You guys still do cash for keys?
Yeah.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
I haven't had it recently as much, but we did it in COVID a little bit.
Yeah.
We offer that. Cash for keys is where you have a tenant that won't get out and you go, listen, I'll give you $3,000 and just get out.
Right.
And they get out. And because the reality is, if they stay there for 6 months and don't pay rent, I'm more in the hole. They're probably doing more damage to the property. So sometimes it's a better way to just get somebody out.
We also wanted to stick a sticker on the, right over here next, but we wanted to stick a sticker on the air conditioning to say, look, if you'll just call me, I'll come give you $300. Don't rip out the air conditioner. I'll come pay you. There was a hand over here first, and then we'll come in.
Beginning, I was interested because you said you started with zero. How did you find your investors? And then how did you find your deals?
Great question.
Good. So in the beginning, just about everything I bought was at the courthouse steps. So that's backwards. Courthouse steps has some risk. I can teach y'all how to do it. It's not scary. It's just risky. When you go to the courthouse steps and you hand them $300,000 and they take their iPad and let you take a picture of it, that's what you get. And so you're literally walking out of there with nothing. Good chance you haven't seen inside the house. If it's lived in, we're sitting in the front yard looking at it. Been chased down the road before, get out of the front of the house. But we're looking at it from the street and taking pictures and judging, what we think it'll be like on the inside. I decided I wanted to learn how to do the courthouse steps. And so I sought out a guy that was doing it at a really high level and paid him. And he coached me and taught me how to do it. And he was so good at it and he couldn't do everything he wanted to do. So I said, hey, let me go here and I'll find these deals and I'll buy them and I'll fix them. Now, I don't fix anything, right? I don't fix anything. My tool is a checkbook. But get them fixed and then sell them and then he'd get his money back plus his half of the profit and I get half the profit. You're just finding people to do it. And nowadays it would be pretty tough probably to find somebody to do half and half. That's the way it was back then. But any percentage, if you have no money in it, as long as you're making enough that's worth your while to do it. I mean, cash on cash return there's not a number for it, right? You got zero in it.
And then you have hard money options. You wanna speak to that a
Yeah,
little bit?
and I've never used a hard money, but people are scared of hard money. I wouldn't be scared of hard money. And I always tell everybody in this class, and I don't know what they are today, but back when I first started and I needed the money, the hard money was probably 4 points, meaning on $100,000 house, that'd be 4,000. You're paying them 4,000 just for the service. And then maybe 14%. That's a pretty high interest rate, right? Even today, that's a high interest rate. But I was paying 50%. I was splitting the whole deal 50-50. So it's cheaper than mine was. So hard money options, they're out there. Well, every time in this class, we always say, if you find a deal and you let people know, you'll find the money. Yeah. And people want to invest in real estate. So if you find the deal, you'll find the money. And right back here and we'll come to you. Yeah.
So, two things. Number one, have you ever bought tax sales? Number two, when you buy something on the courthouse steps as like a foreclosure and it's occupied, are you doing cash for keys then too?
Yes, yes and yes. So yes, tax sales, cash for keys anytime that we need to, occasionally it's either vacant or you have somebody that's willing to move out, but that's rare. So anytime we would always offer cash for keys. Now, what he asked about is two totally different animals. Both of those would be called a foreclosure sale, but one of them's a bank foreclosing on a loan and one of them's a tax. If you are wanting to go into the courthouse step business, the tax sale is much easier. Okay. So for instance, we cover 10 counties on any given, like this week coming up right now is when we start working on them because the data doesn't come out until this week. So we're running through a bunch of data. We're scurrying around looking at houses. We're trying to get that list narrowed down from, used to be during the crash, maybe 100. Now it's maybe 50. Yeah, we're trying to get narrowed down to maybe 10. And then our attorney's running title on 10 properties. You got to run title on it, right?
Yeah.
You can't just go to the courthouse steps. You could be buying a second mortgage and now you just inherited a first.
Yeah.
They won't talk to you because it's not your first, but you owe it. So we're running title on all these things and then we try to buy them. A tax sale, you don't have to run title. Y'all learned
Everything's
that
wiped out, right?
in real estate school. Tax sale, the taxes are the highest lien there is. Everything else goes away under it. So you can go look at a tax sale property. You can go to the local assessor's office or online and they'll say, here's what's foreclosing this month. And you go look at them, do a COA on it and go down there and buy them. And you're relatively safe. Safe in that you may not have gone in the house and you may not know exactly what you're getting there, but you're not buying a second mortgage or anything
But
like
you've
that.
also got a period where they can
Depends on your county.
Okay.
So
That's not in
again,
every county?
Clayton and Henry are right beside each other. Clayton County, you hold it for a year. So you give them the money, you hold it for a year.
Right.
If they redeem it, meaning they come and back, pay the taxes, they get it back and you get 20%. And a lot of people do that
Great investment.
Yeah, look at, a lot of people, that's their investment. They don't want the house. They want the 20%.
Right.
We wanted the house. So we do Henry County, and Henry County's only 60 days that we have to hold it. But if they redeem it, we don't get anything. There's no interest that we get paid.
So that's a per county thing then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So do
depends on
you
the
do
county.
anything to that property in that 60 days? You hold it for 60 days and then you do.
It's really not even yours for 60 days. It's theirs.
You don't want to put anything.
Right. Yeah, you would get your money back, but if it's vacant and you went over and started rehabbing it, which we have done before, and it got redeemed, and you don't get that money back. Yeah, you just fix their house for them.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. My house is falling down. I'm not gonna pay my taxes. for it.
Yeah, right.
I'll just take it back.
Have somebody come fix it for them, say, that's always interesting, but you had a question.
I did. So talking about holds, you look for cash flow, of course. What else do you look for when you're looking to make an offer on a property? Is it always like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, or what are the things you look for and what are the things you stay away from?
Always stay away from. There's not a whole lot, the price drives all that.
Okay.
So I would tell you, I would pay more for some things, less for some things. So more if I look at real estate, if any kind of characteristics that create like scarcity, meaning you can, from the house, you can walk to a park or walk to a school or walk to a retail center. Those have more value to me. Like I'll pay more for those because long-term, they'll be good. Also, it's, walk to school and it's a good school district.
Yeah.
So those things have more value to me as far as I'll put more into it. But I've bought some doozies that, weren't the best properties. I look for some things that might be like, like the power lines like right in the backyard or something like that that I can't change.
Right.
But even sometimes like with retention, landscaping, you can kind of fix that
Right.
depending on the property.
Yeah.
I stick with the 3-bedroom, 2-bath plus, whether it's a
Nothing
ranch, split
less.
floor level. I'm sorry?
Nothing less than 3-bedroom.
I would consider it, but I did one of them and it hasn't been great. Yeah,
Okay.
the rent,
different.
it's interesting when we lose a bedroom, the rent rates are gonna stay low forever. Like they won't go up as much like a 3 or 4-bedroom property.
Okay.
So I prefer to have, and I do focus mostly on the single family. I don't buy condos.
That was my next question.
Yeah, because the problem with condos, and people have done that and done really well with it. The problem is I can't control the association fees. And if they're mismanaged, they're embezzled. I mean, it's just a piece that I can't control. And I don't like the fact that I don't own the land.
Right.
Because, if something happens with a house, if it burns down, I have a piece of land and I can build back something.
Right.
So I will do some townhomes, but I rarely, they have to be a really, really good deal. I tend to stay away from those too.
Okay.
Because again, I can't control what happens, who moves next to me if they're, playing heavy metal all the time and driving the tenant away. I mean,
The one difference in that is we do have duplexes together.
oh, yeah, I do all this.
They're phenomenal. Now, they're not
That was-
3-bedroom,
But you own
but
the
they're
building.
phenomenal. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
oh, yeah, it's
So you-
land.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
own the whole building
Yeah.
of that duplex. So
Nice.
yes, duplexes are great. The only thing to remember when you're doing duplexes or quadruplex, man, they're all really good well, if you get it at the right price, they're great investments. But just remember, if your strategy is to sell it at some point,
Right.
less than 30 years from now, when you get ready to sell, you're only selling to investors, right? So
Right.
you're not gonna get top dollar for them, generally speaking. You're gonna sell it to an investor that's gonna want to do.
Yeah.
Now I have a question on that. Sorry.
Well, no, I was just saying on the, when you're doing multifamily duplexes, triplexes, it typically takes a lot more capital. In fact, we first partnered on it, and we were getting ready to partner to buy, he actually brought it to me, we're like, yeah, let's do this, partner together, we're gonna buy, it was like six duplexes
This duplex.
in Covington. And so this is a flipping guy.
Yeah.
So let's talk, because we might have a different perspective of
Right.
how much we gotta put into the property, because we're playing the long game on it.
Yeah.
You might share
You were
that.
pretty close to right.
I know.
You said 2 years.
Yeah.
And it took about 2 years before we ever showed any money.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
generally, we're not showing profit on these, but there's money. And before there was any money, it was about 2 years. And we learned that if one side has German roaches, the other side has German roaches.
Let's go back and forth. Yeah, I get both tenants out.
It's it's like me going to get my car fixed. He could have made up anything,
Right,
right? Hey,
yeah,
you
yeah.
got Ethiopian bugs in here or whatever, you got German roaches. And so, yeah, that was a
Yeah, it's,
interesting thing.
but with that, you have to, when you buy duplexes, especially if you're buying from an investor who is self-managing, that's always not good. Most investors who've managed themselves, they've not taken care of the properties. Also, another little red flag when I'm buying rental properties is that the rent is really, really low. There's a reason it's really, really low. Typically, some landlords will keep the rent low to keep the tenant in there. So they will ignore the the leak in the roof or problems in the property. They'll do that. So you just kind of know, okay, that's usually my first red flag. And if you have a duplex that's low rent, you're like, oh boy, this is gonna be. So usually it's a lot of capital up front to replace and fix and get rent ready. You're trying to probably change over tenants as they come out. And you want to upgrade it and jump rents up and all these things, but it takes that first year. The second year, you're still kind of finishing that, getting closer. And the third year is solid cash flow, man. It's been great ever since.
Laid out exactly yesterday. He called me, hey, I got this great rental house. They've been great tenants. They moved out. It was low rent. And I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, it's crazy low.
Yeah.
And I went in there with saying, there's holes in the roof, there's mold, there's everything. Not scary. Man, yeah, we can fix all that.
Just for that price.
The price, right? The price has got to be right. Somebody raised their hand back here.
Okay.
Was it you? Go ahead.
Yeah. So, with your rentals, do you cover, like pest control, lawn maintenance, things of that nature and bury that into your rent so that way you can maintain your properties a lot better?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. Marcy and I have talked about that, my wife and I, at some properties and some of the duplexes, I don't think we do it in Covington, but I think we do it there. I have done that because it was hard to chase. So we just built in the rents and said, we'll maintain the maintenance for the landscaping and some of those things. I have not done it in the single family homes. I thought about it because, sometimes, you find out they're not mowing the yard and they typically aren't the best at that. But, I think you want your property management company doing inspections, checking it out, and you might want to consider doing that so that you can stay on top of that. So I don't rule that out, but we have not done it, except for the multifamily.
If he's not doing it, I'm definitely not doing it. We joke, man, this is before and after, right? So, man, he's got a spreadsheet that tells him how old the air conditions are, right? Because if your air condition goes out in June, you're gonna pay more. It's an emergency and your clients are in there sweating. And I tell them, put a fan in there, man. Just go get a. Yeah. So he keeps track of that and he replaces them in a better season. So it's cheaper. So stuff like that, he would probably, if it would be done, he'd probably do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just.
Well, I mean, it's, when you get into multiple properties, that was an aha for us years ago when we started getting more properties and we're like, wow, you can have a really bad week. All of a sudden 3 units are out, you're like, and it's July and we have to do it right, right now, we have to pay premium on it. So what we started doing, what John referenced is, and I give credit to Marcy on this, we have an incredible spreadsheet that every time we buy a property, we look at all the big components from the HVAC system, if it's a septic, if it's what the condition of the roof is, all these big pieces, hot water heater, and we put in a spreadsheet all the ages. And then what's happening is we're going along and things are good and we're not having a surprise. We'll go to one of our properties and go, hey, this one over here has a 25-year-old furnace in it. Let's replace it now under our control and get bids on it. So we do that to kind of spread that out instead of getting that surprise in the peak markets.
Man, I'm gonna go back real quick because every time we talk about this class, you hear these stories, right? And if I'm sitting in your shoes and I've never bought one, I'm kind of like, yikes.
Yeah.
German roaches and eating in there and all that. I've got a good friend and he's one of those guys that goes around and teaches people how to flip houses. And people pay him thousands and thousands of dollars to do it. It's a never ending supply of buyers for him. And for any of these you hear on the radio that says, hey, come to my seminar, 3 easy steps to get rich in the real estate business. And they charge, I mean, he's expensive. They charge up to $50,000 to teach you how to do this. And people go when they pay that money. And the reason there's a never ending supply of buyers is because they pay that money and they never buy a house. And then the next guy comes in, they go, oh, his is better. And they pay him and they never buy a house. It's not that scary. You just, man, know what it's worth, know what it's gonna cost to fix it, make the offer. The people, that's the key, is people won't make the offer. Okay.
Have you found any difference between going new construction versus getting something that needs rehab and work?
As far as an investment,
Yeah.
So expensive.
I don't think I've ever bought a new construction house. No, yeah, they're, in my world, they're too expensive.
Yeah, it's priced out of my market.
Yeah.
I fight to stay under 300,000, which is hard, but actually, they're out there.
Yeah.
And there was more now than I had last year. Because I couldn't find anything. Everything was popping. And now we've seen some of those below where you just got to make offers out there. But yeah, the new homes, they just get too high on price. And so, it's interesting what I've learned over the years with buy and hold on the higher. So you have a price of real estate that goes up here. The rent's more like this. It kind of gets to a point where it won't go up. If you buy a $500,000 home, it's not gonna have the same relationship rent as you would in a $250,000 home rent. So I just found there's such a gap, there's so much capital I had to tie up in one property. I'd rather buy and just keep hunting for better values and properties that can fix up.
Now, there are investors that build rental subdivisions. I don't know if y'all know that. up here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not, that's out of my league.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not-
Well,
I'm
you
not
can
playing
invest in
that game.
REITs, that's another way to invest in real estate, and it's safer, but you're looking more in that 8 to 12%, rate of return on that. Yes.
So in the rehab that you do, you go through a code enforcer to make sure they come in and, okay. So that,
Which is why he said, he doesn't buy in Fulton County because he, that's not his market.
Yeah.
The reason I don't buy in Fulton County is because I learned my lesson with code enforcement in Fulton County. So I don't ever want to go back there again.
I want to make sure I bring that up because the code enforcer will cost you money. If particularly in, areas that has a lot of rentals.
Yeah.
And as soon as a new tenant goes into a rental, guess who's showing up? Code enforcer, right? He's got to make sure that that house is now livable. If that person can live there before, well, another person should be able to do it as well. But I'm gonna go in there and look. I'm gonna check electrical, plumbing. Oh, I'm gonna check for lead paint. I'm gonna check for a lot of different things, right? So I found out in the area that I'm at, it is it will behoove you to actually become real close friends with your code enforcer. The only reason I'm saying this is because this code enforcer actually was telling me about homes that were coming up to be either demoed.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good friend.
Or someone had a death in the family and they know that
Wow. Yeah.
no one wants this house. He says, once you go and talk to this family, they're ready, right? So you don't know what you get. You're gonna get some bad, and you're gonna get some good. So just be careful with the code enforcement.
I don't want code enforcement or the real estate commission to know I exist. They don't know my name. So in Fulton County, we got crushed by them. In Henry County, in the outer counties, in 10 years, I may have talked to a code enforcement person 2 times.
I'm further out than that.
Yeah, we just don't see them, and we don't, and typically too, in the outer counties too, we're not adding a 3rd bedroom onto the side of a house where you gotta go get permits and things like that. We're fixing what's in there, right? So we just don't run into that very much, yeah.
That's why we avoid section 8 housing.
Yeah. I'm a big fan. It's about Section 8. I haven't done it. Some people do really well at it. I just don't want to mess with that.
I do some, just if they come along, we
Yeah.
turn them down, but.
My father-in-law did it for 15 properties. and
Yeah.
Every one of them was miserable.
Yeah, I think we have one that we took over with a part of a duplex.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's been a real difficult thing to change up that in it. Yeah, and it's like, I wouldn't do that again.
But when do you know when to sell? I mean.
Did you really say?
I'm just trying to understand.
I know.
Have you
You
ever?
can answer that for him, right?
Yeah.
You got the.
Well,
answer.
here's the reason why too. I hold properties long-term. And so when you have had a property that's appreciated and you've depreciated it over the years, when I sell that, all those taxes on the gain and the depreciation gets recaptured. It's pretty expensive to sell it. Whereas if I just keep it and utilize that cash flow and that's kind of the whole thing. I mean, if you look like, what's the easiest way to have a retirement? Well, buy 10 homes and pay them off and done. Like you will have income there to live off of. So it's just kind of a way I've always looked at it is I always buy my properties, I put money into it, I do them on 15-year mortgages. And I want them to be paid off. I don't do I might do occasionally a little bit extra to pay some of them off, but I want them to pay off, but I want to have cash flow building long-term on these properties. So what I would use the properties for is you can get credit lines. So as you build more of a business around this, you can go to your bank, and I do recommend this, is go to like a local or regional bank, not a big bank, because they're useless. But go to a regional local bank and get a banker relationship going now today. And go out, just get a credit line, something. And here's the thing, when I did my research on this, 2 things banks love is if you get a credit line, they want you to use it. So you get a credit line and never use it, but you're like, great, but they're not making any money. They also want you to use it, but pay it off by year end, because it then doesn't carry under the books. It can appear as bad. When interest only loans, banks carry them over next year. It kind of looks like bad debt on their books. So if you pay those off and you get in the habit, you're showing them that you can use it and pay it off and use it, pay it off, then that you have a better place to go back to them and say, hey, I have, these 5 or 6 properties. Can I use this as assets and borrow more money off? And that's how you can build it to where you use that money to buy properties cash or however you're doing it and pay it off and manage it that way. But, that's why there's so much uses for keeping real estate long-term. That's why. So I maybe someday I'll go, hey, I'm gonna sell, but I don't have it in me.
I get that way, but
Yeah, I just realized we ran over, so I give you a disclosure earlier. If you need to leave, no one's gonna call you, but we will stay here if you want us to keep talking about this, because we can talk about all day. So you wanna be sure, no one's trapped, but if you wanna ask more questions, we'll keep talking until you kick us out. Yep. Go there in the top. Go ahead.
Do you do short-term and midterm rentals or just long-term?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. You wanna address that or want me to address it?
you can, I've never done it.
Yeah, oh, I reluctantly did it. So, it was a couple of years ago, one of the most common questions was around Airbnb. I mean, that was a big thing. Now you've seen that change a little bit, pull back in the market. Understand when a market pulls back, the first thing to go is the secondary or reserve, short-term rentals are the first one that drops off. And what's happened differently is that's been such a pain that you have communities, associations, cities making rules around keeping Airbnb out, short-term rentals out, and restrictions around it. So here's what I tell everybody. I do not, to answer your question, historically in the past, prior to 2008, I was heavy into short-term rentals in the Florida areas and did really well to a point. 2008 didn't go so well. If you remember what happened, the market totally blew up. And and so I learned my lesson on that because I was violating fundamentals. And so here's what I would tell you. If you want to play in the Airbnb business, fine, okay. But buy your property, I'm saying in a local area, that the fundamentals of renting it long-term are there. And then go do the Airbnb. And if it doesn't work, you fall back on long-term rental and you're cash flowing. What I've seen people make the mistake is they're getting all these projections. I'm gonna do all this Airbnb, I'm gonna make all this money. They buy the property too high and then all of a sudden it doesn't work out. Now if they rent it, they're losing money, they're trapped. I just be careful with that, because I've seen more people lose money around that. And if you're doing any kind of like an investment, like with a mountain or a lake or a beach property, something like that, and you're using it, remember there's a 14-day rule. If you're trying to get the full write-off on it and investing in it, you can't stay in that property more than 14 days. Otherwise, it unwinds all your write-offs and things around that.
You know anything about the midterm market?
What's a midterm market?
Just like traveling nurses, for instance.
Oh,
going
well,
to-
that's a big deal in Peachtree City because of the film industry.
Yeah.
There's some agents that have done really well down there, but I've never worked in that.
Just going back to your fundamentals here, what kind of private equities are you talking about with your investment?
You gotta be really careful with private equity. And the reason why, that's why I put it up there. Typically, it can be anywhere from a 3 to 5 year commitment. And you don't get your money.
Okay.
There's no option to get your money.
Okay.
And now there's different types of it. Like you have hedge funds where you can get access to now.
Right.
So just, it's funny, years ago, I've done some and I've invested with the Peachtree Hotel Group. They now changed the name to Peachtree Group. They're here in Atlanta and I know those guys are great operators and that's been a phenomenal private equity long-term. So I've always put money there. I had some people make fun of me because I was in part of this group who we do, you want to make yourself uncomfortable, do a PowerPoint on your net worth to a group of high-level Wall Street. I did that and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. But it was funny because they were really intrigued because I was all in real estate. And they laughed because the thing was, they're saying, what we've been telling you, you're all in real estate, you should diversify. And your first private equity that I had done was a real estate private equity. I'm like, really? But it's just my world. So that's, I do a couple of them, but not a lot. I would almost add that as the last tier. I would put that past.
That's what I was thinking when you were talking. I'm like, okay, I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not in
no,
that game.
there are funds really good in there. Here's the thing about anything with an investment, private equity, insurance. You need to be with somebody, they need to be able to explain it to you. And here's what I've learned. And I'll give you an example on private equity. I was in a group where they came in and pitched private equity. I can't remember the firm. I couldn't get it. Now,
Mhm.
I'm not the smartest person in this room. There's really high level people. But it was really interesting because a bunch of them got into it and it was doing well, getting like 10% rate of return. I still couldn't understand how the money was working. It didn't make sense to me. And they kept on kind of making fun of me a little bit. You know, we were like, come on, you should get in this. It seems like a no brainer. We're getting, this is a year and a half later. They're still getting 10% returns. And all of a sudden, fraud goes away. It was a Ponzi scheme and then all of this money. And I listen, I'm not a smart guy. I just couldn't understand it. So what I'm saying is, when you don't understand something, don't invest in it. And if you work with an insurance company or a financial planner, and they're not taking the time to explain something to you, then fire them, find somebody else. Same thing with an accountant. Like I have worn out insurance guys. I'm not like, I had this one insurance guy, I about wore him out. And I made a new spreadsheet, explained it to you. It was actually a good product and I ended up investing into it. But I didn't do it until I fully understood it. Don't be embarrassed. That's their job to explain it to you. They can't, don't do it. Just an easy rule.
To be true, it probably is.
Yeah. I've saved myself there.
So I have a client that was wanting to buy a property in Athens
Uh-huh.
for us, an Airbnb.
Mhm.
Do you have any information on the moratorium?
No, I don't.
Because they had a moratorium for that.
Well, they had one in September, but it was supposed to expire in November.
Yeah.
And so,
There's a lot of Airbnb in Athens, but yeah, I don't.
Yeah, New York City, they're limit, it's like, be careful, with what we're doing. Yeah, just be sure they fall back on the long-term stuff, so they can, the college town's a little bit different, because they can do short-term rentals with college, but
Right.
the Airbnb is really interesting. It's bedroom-based. Yes, I'm sorry, bring it back here in the back.
Do you do any, commercial, properties like office condos?
I don't do office condos, because what an office condo and commercial is, you don't own the land. And so I'm not, and someone might be able to do well with that. I just always, when I answer the question, just based on what I do. I don't like it because I don't have a fallback of piece of property. But I stay under 20,000 square foot as far as commercial buildings. Those, I don't want a big one, because it's a lot of, there's one thing I don't understand about commercial, it's a lot of money. Like it's like when you replace a roof on a commercial building, it's, 80,000, not 15 to 20,000. So it's just be prepared. If you go into commercial, there's just a lot of more money involved. And if you're in the office side of things, then you typically are responsible as a landlord doing a lot of the TI tenant improvements when you have a new tenant coming in. And the cost of construction, commercial is very, very high compared to what it used to be. It's, so just be really careful with that. She had a question here. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Oh.
I was just gonna ask you about raising rate on a hold, raising rent.
Rents, yeah.
On a hold, what is your, I know you have a formula for cash flow, but sometimes you have a good tenant in there.
Yeah,
You're just
no.
like, not gonna rock the boat, everything's good, but then after a couple of years, your property tax is going up and
Yeah.
what, do you just like have I have this situation going on right now.
No, I can totally answer it.
I'm a little nervous about having that conversation, you don't want to lose your tenant, but then at the same
Yeah.
time, like, we've kind of let it go for a little while and now it's like.
What's the
cash
gap?
flow is,
What would you say the gap is? Like, how much it should go up? Like, what's the?
probably like $200.
That's not bad.
$200-300.
Probably
$300.
Yeah, well, the rent rates in the last 3 or 4 years
Yeah.
skyrocketed. Really, I feel bad. Like, wow.
Yeah.
And we have some properties out there which were under the rent rates. And we do have good tenants that have been there for a while. And we're trying to make it manageable, but we obviously it's a business too. So we're trying to, it's a compromise. Obviously if it's something we have a long time ago, we have a big cash flow number, and then we'll go, we'll raise it up something. But we're gonna be, hopefully it's something manageable. And it could be, the answer could be anywhere from, well, it depends on the price point, but it could be $100. It just depends. But
I don't want you to lose a good tenant here.
Yeah.
But if you're 300 under, and I've totally done that. I had some that I just wasn't paying attention on, but if you're 300 under and you raise it 100, they probably can't go out and find that same.
Exactly.
rental. So you're safe. I wouldn't do it 300 at one
No.
time, but I may do it 100
Yeah.
a year or whatever,
And I think rent rates are kind of gonna stay flat. Kind of hope. They'll kind of stay where they're at. I don't think they're gonna go down because there's still, I watched this in our property management companies of inventory. And I haven't seen a significant jump on inventory in the marketplace. We're pretty much turning properties at a good pace still.
Yeah.
So,
And even the, like where I'm at, man, they're building apartments like crazy around us. God, one bedroom apartment, $1,700.
Yeah.
So the rental houses are still a great deal.
right. Oh, yeah.
Still a
No
great deal.
doubt, no doubt. So, yeah, I mean, I would say raise it some, but and then you just kind of watch that for the next renewal.
Right.
Or you could, if you're renewing them, put something in the lease that it's gonna go up
Yeah.
another $100 the following year.
Right.
Or
We
percent.
did, but then.
No, I know. I hear you. I mean, we've looked, every property
You have a
comes
single
up.
person or somebody that's been divorced and you wanna help them out, they're doing good, but then you talk about it, but then I can't do
Yeah.
more, you know. and
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. I
I'm
mean,
new
it
at this.
touch, I mean, it's why,
too
it's
nice.
number one, it's good to have property management.
Right, so you don't talk to them.
You're a little bit removed from that, but we do have a property. We've had it for a long time. We've had it 10 years. He's a good guy and, he's really taking care of the property and we're like $500. The rent should be like, it's probably more than that. But we bought it so long ago and he's been such a great tenant that we've been raising it, but not because he's got a fixed income of where he's at. He's a retired guy. So, but again, having a property management company, that keeps you removed out of that because probably we won't make the best decisions. We get a little more emotionally, attached to it like you are right now. Yeah. And so that's why it's good to have someone in between. What other questions?
Try not to talk to them at all.
Yes.
Not a question, but if you do need a contractor, I know a good one.
Where? What area?
He's, personally, he's my dad.
Oh, awesome.
He does Gwinnett, he goes out in Atlanta. So if you do need, I can give you his contact number.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So with people call me all the time and ask for a contractor and say, hey, can you send a painter or something like that? And I'm like,
But he does it all,
okay.
electrical, plumbing.
Just understand, if you call, the guy that does a house for me is not the guy I'm calling to come paint my house. But look,
This is why we had to have the conversation about the duplexes.
get the paint on the wall, that's all I need, the paint on the wall, yeah. So they're not coming to my house, because I mean, obviously we gotta make a good living at this, so I would hate to offend your dad at all, but.
Yeah, right.
No, he's looking to invest, he's an investor himself.
Okay, cool, good. Yeah, we're not looking for the top dollar, guys to come paint.
Yeah.
Or do any of the work
Yes.
like that.
When you go into a property, do you have like a search, I work with an investor and they had, they're gonna go in, they're gonna do the countertop, they're gonna paint, they're gonna do this, is there like a formula with that, like the amount of dollars that you would go into that? That's 300 versus a, $1,000 house or whatever.
Yeah.
You have like a formula for that.
I would say I have a formula. We do, every house gets painted, every house gets new flooring, and now LVP is kind of cool. It's a little cheaper than hardwood, so if it's a little bit nicer, you can do the LVP. Just about every house gets granite because granite has gotten cheap. You just about can't find laminate countertops anymore anyway. And it's hard to find somebody to put them in. So every house gets granite, every house gets basically stainless steel. Every house, y'all can laugh at me. Man, I just did a house with a lady who's more of a designer and she said, what color are we gonna paint the house? I said, agreeable gray, the same thing I painted for the last 10 years. She's like, that's so out of style. I'm like, well, my painter calls me and goes, what color? Same color we did for the last 100 houses. So it doesn't change much. But then I'm not a designer. So those are the basic things that, if it's a roof, now you got other issues and.
To expound on that, do you have like maybe a pricing situation with your contractor that they know if we're gonna go in and we're gonna do the granite, we're gonna do the flooring, we're gonna do the painting, you kind of have an idea of what that's gonna cost you as you go in?
I know, yes, I can look at it and tell pretty close, but so generally my contractor is gonna do some repairs, fix the walls and paint it. But then it's a countertop guy going in, it's a flooring guy going in. Part of that is because I get a better price spreading it out, but the other part is speed. So while this guy's painting, I've got people measuring and doing those things. I don't want him doing everything. It takes too long. So generally speaking, after you've done enough of them, you can tell. Now, a girl called me the other day and she's doing her first flip and I gave her my contractor, but I told her to go in there with a spreadsheet and get every dollar because she's never done it before. So she needs to know. But generally you can walk in and tell. And it really, if it's a 2,000 square foot house, it's 40,000. If it's a 3,000 square foot house, it's probably 50 on that, assuming you don't need some major things. That's just the normal rehab.
Yeah.
That's not a roof and air conditioning. That's just normal stuff, right? Yeah. Good. You mind?
Was this helpful?
Very
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for having us. We'll hang around here for a few minutes, so if you have any other questions that you hadn't asked, feel free. We'll be up here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. No, yeah, y'all can, hang around, let Rob come up with his group. Yeah. Talk about their amazingness.